Joining us today for an ethics overview for Peer Support Specialist, Part 1. I'm Carla Neely. Foley Nash and I will be presenting this material, and our contact information will be included at the end of the presentation if you have any questions or comments.
Advanced slide.
This is our confidentiality disclosure. And our biographies.
I'm Foley Nash. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health for Aetna. And you have a little of my history on screen with that slide. And that ties in with my former work as chairman of both the Ethics and the Government Relations Committees for the Louisiana Counseling Association. Advance.
And here's my biographical information. I've been a peer support specialist for 15 years. I'm currently employed as a recovery and resiliency administrator for Aetna Better Health of Louisiana. I've worked on developing and implementing a peer-run warm line in Louisiana and the peer support whole health and resiliency program. I've also presented on peer support topics at local, state, and national conferences. Advanced slide. Our learning objectives for part 1 of the presentation will cover the common elements of a code of ethics and the core values and principles of a code of ethics.
These are from the American Counseling Association Code of Ethics, which is a nationally accepted code that also applies to Louisiana counselors. So it's in effect in Louisiana as well. One of the questions that comes up is, why would we have a code of ethics? What do we need one for? The principles in Louisiana's Peer Support Specialist Code of Ethics guide peer support specialists in the various roles that they have, their relationships that they do and can have, and levels of responsibility in which they function professionally. The purpose of the goal is additionally to help preserve objective and professional relationships with peers that they serve. On the next slide, we have the elements and the sections of a code of ethics taken from the 2014 American Counseling Association Code of Ethics, which runs to 24 pages and has sections A through I. The sections that are on the slide that are marked with a star are sections that are also equivalent parts of the Peer Support Specialist Code of Ethics. Relationship, confidentiality, privacy, professional responsibility, relationships with other professionals, and the social media. Out of all of those that are listed on the slide, there's one that is actually not in the Peer Support Specialist Code, and that's the one that's in red. The ACA code gives a guide and has an entire section on resolving ethical issues. The Peer Support Specialist Code really does not clearly address how to resolve ethical issues, which is the reason for this presentation. And Carla is going to take us through the Peer Support Specialist Code of Ethics, and I'm hoping it will be very familiar for you.
Okay, the next several slides will cover the Peer Support Code of Ethics for Louisiana. The principles in the following Code of Ethics will guide certified peer support specialists in their various roles, relationships, and levels of responsibility in which they function professionally. Peer support specialists at all times will reserve an objective and professional relationship with peers that they serve. Individuals who participate in the peer support specialist training will be required to sign a form acknowledging the receipt of the Code of Ethics. So every time you attend a training for peer support, to be a peer support specialist, you receive a copy of this Code of Ethics, and it's your responsibility to read it, sign it, and return it. There are 14 items. The first item, peer support specialists will conduct themselves in a manner that fosters their own recovery and will maintain personal standards that are respectful to self and community. Peer support specialists will be open to share with service recipients and coworkers their stories of hope and recovery, and will likewise be able to identify and describe the supports that promote their recovery and resilience with the intention of helping peers with their own individualized recovery. Peer support specialists will keep current with emerging knowledge relative to recovery and openly share this knowledge with their colleagues. Item 4, peer support specialists have a duty to inform service recipients when first discussing confidentiality that contemplated or actual harm to self or others cannot be kept confidential. Peer support specialists have a duty to accurately inform service recipients regarding the degree to which information will be shared with other team members based on their agency policy and job description. Peer support specialists have a duty to inform appropriate staff members immediately about any person's possible harm to self or others or abuse from caregivers. Peer support specialists will never intimidate, threaten, harass, use undue influence, physical force, or verbal abuse, or make unwarranted promises of benefits to the service recipients that they support. Peer support specialists will not practice, condone, facilitate, or collaborate in any form of discrimination on the basis of ethnicity, race, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, age, religion, national origin, marital status, political belief, disability, or any other preference or personal characteristic, condition, or state. The 7th item, peer support specialists will not engage in any sexual, intimate activities with the consumers that they serve. Peer support specialists will not enter into dual relationships or commitments that conflict with the interest of those they serve. Peer support specialists shall only provide services within the hours, days, and locations that are authorized by the agency with which they work. Peer support specialists will not accept gifts of significant value from those they service. They do not loan, give, or receive money, goods, or payment for any service to or from any service to or from service recipients. Peer support specialists will not discuss their employment situation in a negative manner with any service recipient. Peer support specialists will at all times respect the rights, dignity, privacy, and confidentiality of those they support. Peer support specialists will not abuse legal or illegal substances under any circumstance. And the last item in the peer support code of ethics, peer support specialists will not use derogatory language in their written or verbal communication to or about persons served. Peer support specialists will use accurate and respectful language in all communications to and about persons served.
And I'll be taking the next slides to describe a little bit of the ACA code and how that translates into the peer support specialist code. As you can see on this slide, there are values that are identified for the professional counselor in the ACA code: enhancing human development, honoring diversity and multicultural approach, social justice, safeguarding integrity, confidentiality kinds of issues, practicing in a competent and ethical manner. And those values translate into 6 core principles of ethical behavior. And the core principles are autonomy, non-maleficence, which relates essentially for centuries back to the Hippocratic Oath, which is simply first to do no harm. Beneficence, not only is it adequate to do no harm, you must also do some good. 4, justice, 5, fidelity, and 6, veracity. Those professional values then translate into ethical principles, and the principles are then found on the next slide in the peer support specialist code. And there they are. We have the 6 ethical behavior principles that are now on the left instead of the right. And the peer support specialist code has item references listed on the right to tell you where those principles are referenced or found. One of the ones I wanted to point out in particular was that there are certain principles that seem to be referenced a lot. For one, non-maleficence has multiple references, and also fidelity has multiple references. You can see lots of references there. Even though it doesn't have as many references, the non-maleficence, which has a lot of references, is in reality going hand in hand with the beneficence reference, which, like I say, doesn't have as many references, but they're equally important in that not only do we do no harm, but we also do some good with what we're trying to accomplish. And our next slide indicates the references where a lot of this material is to be found, and that will conclude part 1. And we have our references here for further reading, and following that, our next slide has our contact information.
So thank you for joining us today for part 1 of peer support ethics.